We're ready for you. Commissioner Bedard,
Here.
Commissioner Malakoff,
Present.
Commissioner McPhail,
Here.
Vice Chair Meade, Chair Lee.
Present.
Thank you.
Now please stand as you are able and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda finalization. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Would the clerk please read the statement of participation?
This is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items not appearing on the regular agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the Commission may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask a question for clarification. The Chairman may also request a brief response from staff to questions raised during public comment, or may request a matter to be agendized for a future meeting. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes.
And do we have any requests for comment?
We have no request to speak forms.
Thank you. Moving to approval of the minutes. Approval of November 5th, 2025 Planning Commission minutes. Do we have any corrections or additions? Do we have any public comments on the minutes?
No comments?
Do I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second. So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, let the record show that a motion was made by Member Malakoff and seconded by Member McPhail, and the motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 3, non-public hearing items. Item A, permissibility of non-conventional construction methods and materials of California Residential Building Code and design considerations. May we have a report, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My presentation, leave it upstairs. So, I have one page though. Well, thanks for being available for this special. We're here to have a discussion on non-conventional construction materials. And I would just preface this to say that this was a request by Commissioner Bedard to have this discussion, but it did generate a lot more internal discussion on our side. And so I think today's discussion, we can use it as a springboard, so to speak, to have further discussions down the line about design standards for single-family residential. But what was asked for was to have our building official provide information with regard to non-conventional construction materials and their permissibility. And the answer to that is very straightforward. Yes, non-conventional, well, first of all, I have a photograph here of conventional construction materials, right? Even, steel, steel frame, metal, things like that. That's all conventional. Non-conventional, we're talking about materials other than that we typically use. In the report, our building official, Jeremy, who unfortunately wasn't available today, but provided information on alternative construction materials. And with respect to cost valuation, building permits, type of energy ratings, things of that nature. So very generalized, and that was fine because the gist of that is that yes, other construction materials, non-conventional materials, are permissible under the building code, but you have to be able to justify, so to speak, that they do meet construction standards. And so basically, at the end of the day, we want a safe structure that people can live in. And so they need to demonstrate that, which is providing plans to the city, having an engineer prepare those and stamp those and demonstrate that they do meet the codes. And so provided that that can be met, it's permissible from a building permit standpoint. So, the non-conventional materials that were identified in the attachment that was provided by the building official, I basically follow that, right? So you have straw bale construction. So here are a few images of straw bale construction. On the top right, you can see that this one, the exterior, is being finished with a plaster. So, as far as the exterior, it can be, look very conventional. You got plaster, brick, what have you. But the structure itself is made of straw bales. Here you have rammed earth. Have a photograph of how that's being constructed. And so you have earth and you basically ram it, and you have different layers of that. And so you end up with, again, architecturally you can design it however your client wants it designed, so to speak. So on the top right, again, it looks like it's a stucco finish. On the bottom, you have more of the finish of the layers of the rammed earth. And then just showing you different designs architecturally that can be done with this type of materials. Here you have, insulate concrete forms. I kind of covered that up. But the image is to show how this works with the insulated forms on the outside and the concrete in the middle, and then some rebar to support it. But that's, again, the construction materials and methods. Again, you can have it look like however you design it. And so that'll be the common theme, is it can look like whatever you want it to look like, architecturally. Here we have cross-laminated timber. Again, just an image of what that is. The timber is actually, basically put in a cross pattern. Again, this is what architecturally it can look like, different styles. And then we have, these were handouts that were provided by the building official. On the left is the cost estimate, and on the right is, I should say, just staff Googling cost comparison. The baseline is stick frame, conventional construction, and then looking at the different type of alternative materials we talked about. It provides you, cost estimates for construction, long-term energy. I think this particular table, what it demonstrates is that the construction of a home using alternative materials will not necessarily be any less than conventional construction. It could be more, it could be less. But I think the real savings is over time, in that these materials are more energy efficient, or can be more energy efficient. So over the long term, you'll find that cost can be recouped over time. But here's where the discussion really, internally, we start having these discussions, is that, yes, you can use those materials, and through these pictures, we were able to demonstrate that architecturally it can look very similar to what we're used to, but we don't have design standards. I should say we don't have objective design standards. Our design guidelines are from 1998-ish. They don't really have a lot when it comes to single-family residential design. It does for multifamily, and multifamily is kind of a different use on its own. It's going to have, I anticipate that in our code update as we go through it, we're going to have standards for multifamily. But single-family, a lot of cities have just kind of taken a little bit of step back. They don't they don't establish standards as rigorously, so to speak, that they do for multifamily. We'll have standards as far as height and setbacks and things of that nature. And some cities will require architectural elements. And so we don't have anything, and I think as we go through our code update, we're going to have that discussion about, should we have objective design standards for single-family development? And if we do, what should it be? We talked about, because single-family, again, especially when we talk about infill, 2 or 3 lots at a time, we don't establish any standards. And do we want to? And maybe it's not so specific as to standards for all single family, or not standards that dictate roof pitch, design of windows, design of doors, but maybe it's more of looking at where we live, the type of climate we have, and do we look at establishing standards that speak more to addressing climatic conditions for our valley. And when you look at, and it was attached to the report, when you look at the design standards, they do kind of have some standards or some guidelines related to, oh, another picture I wanted to show you. And it speaks to the objective design standards. So these are alternative construction materials. These potentially can meet our code, right? The engineer is engineering and stamping that it meets our code. It's going to be safe structure, but these are not design features that we typically see in our community. And so when we start looking at, yes, it meets our building code, again, this leads to that question, because we've had this really, discussion between Cynthia, Andy, and myself. It's like, well, what if somebody comes in with a dome home shaped like that? And you have geodisc homes, and this here on the bottom left, it's rammed earth, but the style is very, well, it's a square, basically. It's very beautiful, it's pretty, but it's not there's no roof, there's no eaves, things we typically think about. So that's why we had this discussion about objective design standards as it relates to climate, because yes, this is more efficient, but would it be more in keeping with our climate to say we do want deep eaves? We want recessed windows, perhaps on west-facing or south-facing elevations. We want to see shade trees that would provide shade during the hotter parts of the season. So these structures, these homes, not typical, but it generated the conversation about objective design standards. Objective design standards, as indicated in the staff report, does have very, very, very clear. It's can be verified, or there's no subjectivity. So it's like we have here in the staff report and in the presentation. The third story has to be stepped back. Your windows do have to have some recessed, or your building plane has to be 30% articulated. Those are very clear. I guess it could be more clear to say what that articulation needs to be, but those are objective design standards. And do we want to consider objective design standards when it comes to single-family development? And here's our design guidelines. When we talk about having maybe standards based on climate, our design guidelines do talk about orientation, talk about windows facing east or west. They talk about deep recesses, protection from sun. So we do have at least the start of some discussion about standards for residential development, but this is all we have right now. I do suspect, and Cynthia and Andy can jump in here, but we are going to probably start having these discussions as we go with our code update. So that is my presentation. That's the information I have. We're happy, well, we want to have discussion. We don't expect any answers right today, but at least we can start a discussion about design standards as it relates to single-family development.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is an item for discussion only. There won't be any voting on it. My understanding would be that what we do put together here in terms of our comments will be taken away by staff and added to that discussion. But are you saying that the steering committee, the development code bodies will be examining this issue as well?
Well, we're going to, right, our design guidelines are from 1998, and so we're going to be updating them, but we're going to incorporate them into our zoning code, or our development code. And so that will be more clear standards. But we haven't gotten to that discussion yet in our steering committee code update discussions.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with, let me see, Commissioner Bedard.
Well, thank you. part of my passion. So I appreciate that. If we could go back to that last slide. One, thank you to staff and the city for being really open to this, to these ideas, and it's a movement really that's happening across our country and in other countries to look for more affordable. And in my understanding, and we did discuss this a little bit, in the groups I work with, we can create based on the numbers that you had are higher than what we could do at other organizations. So you could make the cost of building actually lower depending how you do it. If you do group style building, if you do co-building, if you do sort of co-op type of things, prices can be actually significantly lower. Because a lot of the cost, especially if you're doing rammed earth or super adobe or those types of things, it's labor and your framing actually. So you have to create a frame to insert into a space and then put your rammed earth or adobe or earth bag around that frame. So if you know somebody who's done a house and they already have those frames, then your cost is even significantly lower because you're going to get the frame from them, either for cost of materials or just to share. And so that even reduces your building if you have community involved in the process. There's a couple things I do want to point out. I love that you guys did this. I was hoping that the building materials and the design standards would be more separate, because the building materials is fantastic, and like you said, you could use a material to do a very conventional. You could drive down the street and not even notice that house was necessarily different than the neighborhood. And when you get into design standards, right, if you're going to ask, like, I think there are good design standards, like you would build more houses that could handle snow loads, right, in snow areas, right? You want a steeper peak, stuff of that sort. I think it would be smart in the desert to have required eaves, like 3-foot eaves, to have south-facing, more south-facing, what's the right word? Walls, I guess, right? Or maybe actually more north-facing windows to make that requirement. You're not getting the heat of the sun, right, as you're facing north. Those types of things are, I think, really great. And by putting that design overlay, is it only going to be for alternative materials? Or are we going to go to Lennar or any of the big homeowners and say, all right, we're putting a design overlay and we want all of the new construction to have 3-foot eaves, and we want them to be situated on the land so that you're not going to get direct sun through you in the majority of your windows, and we want you to be able to plant trees. That's, to me, a separate discussion from material. And if somebody is doing, say, that blue house, that's most likely it's a Cal Earth super adobe home, which is an earth bag home that's circled around and the frames are inserted, the house structure is completed, it becomes like a concrete, and then you put your windows in. Aircrete is often a similar structure, or just a slightly different, a very different material, but built in the same way. When you build these type of designs, right, so you could use that type of material and make it look like that, or you can use that material and make it look like something else, right? I love that we're giving the opportunity, or we're hoping to give the opportunity for different ways of building. A lot of houses haven't changed in 80, 90 years, and we've been kind of conditioned because of large corporations to look at housing as being one particular way, right? Because those corporations started building housing at the cheapest, most cost that they could reproduce quickly, all that type of stuff. So their same house built here, I said Lennar earlier, so I'll say them again. Lennar builds the same house here in the desert with no condition in its building style or structure for the desert, and it builds the same house in Louisiana and the same house in Vermont. Are we going to then ask Lennar to do that? Or are we going to put on single lot infill? Are we going to put a different requirement for Lennar on big areas that they're developing? Or are they going to Are we going to say, oh, only the single person that, or not single person, but the person that's building out a single lot has more requirements, and they're going to have more design standard requirements?
No, we would have that discussion on single-family development across the board.
Yeah.
Well, the exception is always a specific plan that might have its own standards already established.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Right, and we haven't had I mentioned earlier, we haven't had, there was Republican-style homes, nothing to do with the political party. You look them up, they're impressive homes with like 14-foot doors.
Mm-hmm.
You have Victorians, you have Art Deco, you have Craftsman, you have all these different homes when in older neighborhoods, it's common to see them right next to each other, right? In our newer city, we don't see that, so it might feel kind of like painting a restaurant a bright color that everybody hated in the beginning. Then now everybody says, oh, I love it, which I hear. There was a lot of resistance to that color. My concern is that because it is different, because it doesn't, some of these homes don't follow what we're used to, we're going to kind of push it away. And so that's a concern on inviting, especially if it comes to allowing people to do, right now you can do these ADUs in the front yard. Like, how do you say that an ADU is okay of one style, and are we going to put design overlay zones, which is different than design standards, right? So it becomes a little tricky, and I'm curious to other people's thoughts about that. Do you know what I mean by design overlay zones compared to design? Yeah, okay, you guys, you're more experienced than me.
Okay. Commissioner Malakoff.
This is all very interesting. I kind of have two thoughts. It's hard to get people to change. I think that's probably the biggest stumbling block. A couple years ago, I came back from a planning conference all excited about the city of Richmond had a health element that they built into their general plan, which nobody else did. And it took long-term health ideas and built them into the development code. And for somebody that struggles with weight issues and things like that, I thought that was just great. Who wouldn't want that? And I came back here, and boy, was I wrong. I couldn't get anybody to be interested in it on the city side or the developer side. And it really takes perseverance and some doing to get people to change their minds. And the developers are very stubborn in their thoughts. I'm dealing with one now that is building one of those 80-year-old concepts that you could have in Iowa, and we were trying to get them to do some uniqueness to it, and they just absolutely refused. So you're dealing with a difficult group of people, so the way that you go about this is going to be very important in how to convince people to try something different, because they're not the most open-minded people that want to jump into something new. And the other question, but I do like all this. I think it's very interesting, and I think that if we can make homes more affordable for people, then maybe people don't have to wait till they're 40 years old to buy their first home. So I do think it's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. The structural question I have is, so kind of, I'm not trying to minimize this, but it's kind of like when you were showing like the straw and everything, it made me think of the Three Little Pigs. And I thought of the wolf as an earthquake, and maybe like a 3.4 and a 5.2 and a 6.8. So when you're dealing with these kinds of homes, would they still be able to be, so California is unique in our seismic codes, whereas in Florida, they're dealing more with high winds and floods. So how would something like this, and maybe Jeremy has to explain it later, how would you implement our California seismic codes and still be able to do this and still keep the costs down?
As far as the how, I guess that might be a Jeremy question, but and maybe it is a Jeremy question, but at the end of the day, what it is that the person that wants to build a home that uses alternative construction methods or materials needs to submit plans and documents and engineer stamp that demonstrate it's meeting all those standards, that it's going to meet the seismic requirements, the energy efficiency requirements, just that it's a structurally sound structure that is going to be habitable. So they need to demonstrate that, and I think there may be different ways to demonstrate that based upon the material you're using. But I can have Jeremy follow up on that.
So we're not talking about, we're talking about somebody that has a 5-acre lot that wants to build a custom home that's going to do something like this. We're not talking about Pulte or Lennar or Gallery of Homes doing a subdivision like this.
Correct. We're not. So we're not suggesting that our standard should be that you have to use alternative construction materials. The question that was asked or posed was that, does our code allow for it? Or somebody wanted to use an alternative construction material, could they? And the answer is yes. Our building code does allow for it. The building code does allow for that. They just need to demonstrate that they're meeting the residential building code. Yeah.
Can you go to this slide?
I don't have this. It's an attachment.
Well, I think in the end, this author's been making the rounds on all of the early morning talk shows about young people, specifically where young men are failing. And there's a huge percentage of young men that are in their late 30s still living in the basement of their families' homes. And if we could find a way nationally or even locally to be able to reduce the cost of homes, even if they're infill homes, I think that would help get more young people into their first homes. Because that's not, it's much more difficult than it was when we did it.
Thank you. Commissioner McPhail.
I'm not aware. Commissioner Bedard might be.
So what is it? Oh yeah, they're cool. Just so two things. Our first house is built in the valley here, stone, right? Our second house that was built, or actually they were reeds. Our first house was then our white colonial house was stone. Our next one, or even when we were in part of Mexico, is adobe. And adobe gets stronger over the years if properly maintained. And these round homes, domed homes, they increase their strength in their building. I don't know, besides the Agnes Pelton house, I don't actually know how that was built. What material?
Which isn't a relatively...
There are houses over below, in the neighborhood that's off of 111, below, I think it is Palm Springs, below the Bob Hope House. There are old stone houses that are built in there that are now historic. They were just on the market for being rebuilt.
But
to
nothing
be sold.
super recent probably, that certainly has come across
Nothing
the
recent.
desk of the city. And
Free Estates is Adobe, if I recall.
Yeah.
Too. So we do have some, but
And there is, to mention, to piggyback on the hay bale house, actually hay bales are framed with a 3-foot wall space. So when you build a hay bale house, you have an interior framing and you have an exterior framing, and the hay actually goes in that space. So you have a standard concrete slab foundation with a double frame, and then so the structure is super, super solid, right? You're building, and so instead of infilling with like lath and plaster or plywood or those types of things, you're actually framing or filling the house. You can see it in the picture there. You're actually building your walls, and they're sandwiched in on the sides and structurally around. So that's how most hay bale houses are done.
So at the moment, we have 1998 guidelines, and you were talking about objective design standards, and perhaps folding that into our development code update. Given, for example, that Palm Springs has just gone through their development code update, do we know, did they take the step of doing objective design standards, or are there other cities around us that have
most
taken that step?
cities in the state are moving the direction of objective design standards. Recent legislation has taken away ability for cities to review many residential projects, single-family, multifamily projects against the codes that you're holding in your hand. We can no longer use those subjective design standards for many residential projects. So I think cities are looking to see, what they still can control, and those standards that are uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark. Those are the standards that we still have left. Outside of setbacks, what else can we still describe? I think Sandra has given you some indication of the direction that we may go for residential projects across the city. This is a subset of that. But I think there are objective design standards that we can look at across the city that reinforce whether it's climate or other design controls that we still have.
So I was just wondering, we may not have to reinvent the wheel if we go down that path, that there are out there either in the state or maybe even in desert environments, some people have already developed those standards and they may be translatable to us, so we don't have to start from scratch.
Yes.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
So during the walking tours, we had several walking tours back in March, and I know that some of the commissioners and council members were on those walking tours. Those walking tours were intended to look at the local architecture and look at the features and the layout of the architecture that is local to Cathedral City. So we really want to create our own design standards as they are replicable here and appropriate here. And I use the word hyperlocal just to get a sense of we really want to be our own cathedral city here.
Yeah.
And then one other thing that I did want to add in there as well is that as we're talking about standards, we're looking at wholesale rewriting of those objective design standards for non-residential as well as for multifamily residential. And then we're looking at some of those standards for single-family residential, but I think they will be more of a de minimis type of, I think I'm probably describing that right, and trying not to make those single-family residential design standards onerous for the applicant, to help encourage them to continue to make them low cost and efficient and find that balance of their budget. Because as we're looking at this and asking the questions, and to Commissioner's point about making sure that they would withhold the seismic load, yes. So here, different from Colorado and different from Minnesota, where we didn't require them to be reinforced with steel, they would do something like that here, so that they could meet that. That's going to add a cost to it that maybe they would not have in, say, the state of Texas or somewhere else, but they're dealing with different environmental concerns. The other thing that changes the cost calculus on this is the ability for local labor force. So I think that's another thing that, when we're talking about a Lennar or a Pulte or any of those other national home builders, those national home builders can build at a rate of 20 homes a month or something like that, because they have the skilled labor that can put out a home that they can replicate in a very short manner. They can't do that with this type of construction. It's not made that way, and you can see in the images that Ms. Molina has put up that it's not easy to. The reason that stick frame construction took off, or site-built stick frame construction took off, is that it was so easy to replicate. They have hollow walls with plasterboard over there, or gypsum board over those hollow walls. It makes it really quick and easy to build those homes. So those are some other considerations in this as well.
And that was, I noticed that, in the report, and the question that you brought up in the report was specifically about single-family dwellings, but we might also be visiting multifamily, commercial, to have objective design standards for other sorts of uses as well.
Yep. I just want to add something that, to piggyback on what Cynthia was saying, is that typically for single family in our city, in the terms she was a de minimis standards for single family. And I think that's, as we have this discussion, I don't think staff's not suggesting that for single family development that we have really, stringent or numerous standards for single family development. We still think that as we have this discussion, we probably want to keep them minimal, but what would those minimal standards be? Would they be based on climate? So we have the deep eaves, or, based upon the elevation and the sun, do we want awnings? Do we want recessed windows? Those type of standards, they don't have to be numerous, but maybe what they are, they're meaningful for the construction of the home.
I think climate-oriented objective standards seem like a very good idea for living out here. It sounded like you were maybe uncertain whether we were going to address this as part of the development code update, but we are. Do you think we are definitely going to do that? That will come back to us at some point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I didn't have too much other than just to say I think this is great. I think the more we can encourage people to do whatever makes the most sense, and I love the fact that we were able to see in that chart that even if something is maybe slightly more expensive at the beginning, that you can recoup those costs, maybe like putting in solar or something like that over the years based on it being, cheaper to cool and those kind of things. I think that's great. And I think, we're a relatively new city, with the exception of the Cove. We don't have historic districts that need to maintain some sort of, I have a friend in LA who lives in a historic district where almost all the homes were Sears mail order homes. And so they all have the same style. They all have to have, the way they're built, like they have to have a very slight incline in the front, and they can only use certain fencing that matches the homes. We don't have anything like that, right? So I think there's no reason for us to say we don't want infill housing to look different than the housing that's already there. I think that there are certain neighborhoods in Panorama where I live. We have a lot of two-story homes. We have some split-level homes that may not be common in other areas, but it's not. The houses don't all look the same already. And someone told me that there is actually a dome house in Panorama. I've never tracked it down, but Councilmember Gregory told me there is a historic dome house that was there before most of the neighborhood was built out. I keep meaning to try to track it down. And we do have the Dome Church on Cathedral Canyon, which I drive by every time I get here. I don't know if either of them were made with alternative materials, but they're dome houses, which are always cool. So yeah, I think this is great for us to explore it. I agree that the single-family home objective design standards should be minimal, and not really so much, they can't be focused on looks really, because that would make them subjective, right? So I think just making sure we have some sense of protecting people from inclement weather, from the sun, all those sort of things makes total sense to me. So thank you for doing this and putting this together. I think it was really interesting to learn about all these different types of materials and how they all compare. So it's great presentation. Thank you.
Press the button. So first of all, I was curious, do we have any idea of the history as to why we didn't have a design standard for single-family homes? Why was it excluded from previous iterations?
I don't have any information with that. We can try to research it and see what we can find.
Okay. It's pretty clear that
I think what's being said is that it's not that we don't have any, they're just very limited. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you have a design standard, you are all of a sudden set a limit. So you're limiting by having a standard.
so you think that was the historical reason for not including it?
It's, if you don't have one, there's the other thought that you're pretty open to receive anything that might be structurally sound and comply with all the codes. So, I don't know, Andy, opine on that, please.
I think if you look at the city's progression from its incorporation, the city did get more and more sophisticated. I think if you look at the progression of ordinances from just the adoption of county ordinances to the development of ordinances that reflect more of the city's character, more of the city's values, they progressed substantially in a period of 10, 15 years. And the city's first design standards, these were from the late 1980s, early 1990s. They principally applied to commercial development. Those were updated, they were modified over time. Was there a specific intent to exclude residential? I'm not sure about that. I would say that if we look at the progression, it focused much more on commercial corridors and growth areas than it did on residential neighborhoods. And particularly recognizing that the Cove and many of the areas, Golden Mile, those areas were developed prior to the city's incorporation. So I don't think it was intentional, the omission. But I think as the city has progressed, as it has matured, our needs have changed. I think we're at a juncture now with the development code update that, recognizing that we can't regulate in the same way, that we do need to substantially modify those design standards from the 80s and 90s, we do need to make that update. This is a logical moment for us to look at what we expect. And I think that's a key part of the objective design standards. It's not just ensuring that those are uniformly verifiable to that benchmark, but that these can be communicated, conveyed up front to a prospective applicant that's coming into the city. So I think this is a good moment for us to reflect on that, and certainly the steering committee will be seeing this soon, and I think the question of infill lots and how you apply this to individual development projects outside of a tract, outside of a subdivision, I think that is a question of balance and one that we'll need to address in a little bit more depth as we continue with the code update.
Right, but in terms of alternative building, the RBC has never actually restricted that, is my understanding.
What didn't?
The residential building code, it's never restricted us from doing it.
Not the building code.
No.
Not the building code.
Okay. And
Well,
we didn't,
doesn't this apply to the fact that if you applied restrictions, you could limit national builders, and that was always, the intent to attract the city to have builders come in here and build tracts of homes, and you don't want to restrict or limit people that would view the city and say that's too restrictive for our product line and not build
Right.
in that area. So
yeah, I'm not
there's a
disagreeing. I
place
mean, I
in
don't
that.
think it should be restricted. I'm not saying that we should.
I can add a little bit of clarity to that. We asked these very same questions in my previous community, both in the county and the city. And the building code, the residential building code, I know it's different in Colorado because it's superseded here by the California building code, which comes from the international building code. But it was the same question. The building code did not prohibit the use of non-traditional stick frame site-built construction. It's just always been a challenge for those reasons, kind of the reasons I was describing before, and the fact that a lot of folks who were building on single-family developed infill lots, they wanted to have freedom with how they designed their home. They wanted to bring in potentially a modular home or something that maybe was a little bit different or didn't meet a certain residential standard. There were those constraints, but the building code has not ever outright prohibited them. They're
Right.
very hard to meet the code. We allowed any type of, if somebody wanted to propose, in my previous town, we allowed a container home, and it was a 2-story container home, but it had been engineered. The challenge with that, when we told people that, yes, you could do this, but you have to have an engineer stamp off on it, they would go to the engineer, and when they got the engineer's fee, a lot of times they would just drop the project. But, people who have, a different budget could probably pursue the two-story container home. The same is true with some of these larger structures. You don't usually see large multifamily structures of straw bale construction because the higher up you go, the more difficult it gets to do that, and then it takes more reinforcement, costs go up. It's just the economic sense isn't there.
Yeah, I understand all of that, and that's up to the developer and whether or not they want to put that extra cost or extra design or engage engineers to do the development for them. And I just want to make sure we're not in the way. I mean, so this is not an issue that we as the Planning Commission is obstructing in any way. This is all possible already.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So certainly I think it's fairly obvious that we're interested in hearing more about objective design standards for single-family properties, and clearly also it would apply to any single-family property. So it's not a question of just these particular ones. One of the things that we didn't actually get to in this, but has been raised from time to time, and maybe we need to come back to that, is a consideration not just of alternative building standards, but also a fully off-grid house. So being able to have solar and battery, no connection to SCE, so no connection to the grid, which as I understand is actually legal but not done for various reasons. And I guess also we need to look at other utilities. Well, it may be. So we can find that answer at some point. Yeah. Your ChatGPT only goes so far in my learning, so it could be wrong. And I guess also we would look at the need for other utility. I mean, you can legally collect rainwater if you want to try that in this area, and not be connected. So in general, can a house be completely freestanding? Yeah. In terms of the 2025 revisions for Title 24, are we applying those now, or is that something we have to adopt at some future point?
So the City Council adopted the 2025 California Building Standards Code with local amendments, and that will go into effect January 1st.
Okay. So that has some relevance, particularly to alternative styles of housing in increasing energy efficiency and so on. So that may be another factor. Also, and I can't do this single-handedly, but at some point, if anybody would like to join me in welcoming comments on what the effect is on future developments, not new buildings, but I understand that all those new efficiency codes will apply to repairs, additions, and so on. So we can maybe find the answer to that. So the other thing I was interested in was this CLT, or cross-laminated timber construction. Because at a recent presentation I was at, they were talking about the fact that can lower the cost of building, where you're building multiple stories. You can now, let me see, type 4A, you can actually build up to 18 stories, approximately 270 feet, just with CLT. I think it has to have a concrete couple of first stories. So that may be something else that can help in future development. And I think that at some point we will touch on how many stories that we have in any structure. So that kind of alternative material may help with that. I believe we have, let me see, we have MUN zoning for North,
Yes.
the North City, and that allows 65 feet, and I think we have to really, if we want to get closer to our targets for housing. We have to get up to sort of 75 feet. Palm Springs is up to 100 feet. So I think those are other things that have to be considered. Maybe not in this discussion, but at some future point. Yeah. Okay. No, I think that was all. Personally, if I want to buy a single lot and build a teapot house, I think I should be able to build a teapot house. But, anyway, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yes, certainly.
So my hope is, once again, thank you. I think this is really exciting. I don't know if anybody will ever build a super Adobe earth bag, or aircrete, hay bale, but to have the opportunity for that, I think is a big possibility, and it's really a possibility, and that's exciting. I don't think my mic is working. But my next question is, how does this lead into prefab, right? If we're talking again affordability, a lot of prefabs. When I was in Ireland last time, you could buy a house made in Latvia that's a 4-bedroom, 1,500 square foot house for 30,000 euros, and it would cost only $12,000 to bring it to the United States. So that's a house less than $50,000 fully built with everything in it. It's obviously not the plumbing, but the electrical's in the wall, everything, cabinets, everything is in place, right? To actually take one of those houses and bring it into the United States, they're up to our building code standards, they're purposely designed for all of that. Like, if there's a way to have prefabs, how does that fit in as a sort of next logical extension of this conversation? I'm wondering where that would go.
So our building code does allow for pre-manufactured homes already, and some of them are certified by HCD, Housing and Community Development, and so if they have that certification, they're permissible. So there are already allowances for manufactured homes. Even they have pre-manufactured multifamily structures as well, so our code provides for that.
Just to be clear, those aren't like mobile homes or trailer, that type of thing. They are often architecturally significant type of homes that are then dropped in, and they can be very beautiful. So one of the restrictions that I had when I was looking at putting one of these in my yard was that at the time, and I think this has changed, I'm not sure, but the house that I was interested in purchasing from a California builder, California codes, I would have had to take off all of the cladding of the house and re-stucco it to match my house, which just drove up the cost by thousands of dollars. I don't believe we have that on the books anymore, but maybe we do.
Now, for an accessory dwelling unit, yeah, the accessory dwelling unit, actually now with the new standards, if it's 800 square feet or less, there's no architectural standard review.
Right.
And even for over 800 square feet, we could, but I think it would be minimal as well.
Your point, though, is well taken, and there is language in our current design guidelines that suggests neighborhood compatibility. So did we say that in the past? Probably. And I think that is something that we should have deeper discussion as we get into the development code update. How do we incorporate design standards that work? How do we incorporate those objective design standards that meet the requirements for the state so that we're not turning someone away? And to your question about these permits, we have had questions over the counter about prefab manufactured homes. We have had those questions. We have indicated positive support for those. I'm not aware that we've had anyone come in with a non-conventional design, with non-conventional materials. We'd welcome that. To the degree that someone is interested in that, I think that's something that we all agree on staff's part. That's a substantial commitment and investment on the part of an owner coming into the city looking to build that. And I think we want to find a way to back that, to support that, and to say yes.
Yeah, because I'm just curious, like, if, again, I don't expect an answer on this, but if somebody wanted to build, say, a CalEarth-style dome home, think of the blue home in the pictures, if they wanted to put a 300 square foot house that looked like that as a guest unit and it's in the front yard, because now they can do that, how would would an overlay zone be put in where it says, okay, like my neighborhood, all the houses in my neighborhood are ranch style houses, every single one of them built by the same developer over 20 years, right? So would there be a design overlay just for that neighborhood that says that all the houses must match? So I couldn't put that Cal Earth Dome home on my property because potentially it would have to fit in with the neighborhood.
I don't
No.
believe that we can enforce that standard anymore.
Just curious. And thank you to the commission for supporting me in my request to have this information. I appreciate it.
Any other comments? Thank you. Any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments.
Moving on to the development code update.
All right, good evening. All right, so this is an ongoing item for the Planning Commission to provide comments and to give feedback on the report that was included in your packet. And I did include in the packet with the update. The update was actually recent as of 2 weeks ago. I'll give you a brief update to bring it up current. But in that packet, you will have a table that has, I think, 5 or 6 columns across the top. And if you printed it out, I apologize that it's small, but I wanted to capture everything in a single page width. This was the feedback that we heard on the last 2 sections, the previous 2 sections, the permit procedures and the code administration, on that discussion. So it has tagged comments, or the technical advisory group comments are in there. Steering committee comments were in there. Planning commission comments were in there. It also includes the discussion that backed that item, as well as the staff's recommended action, and then any follow-up. So you can track those comments as they go through that process. I'm planning on doing that for all of the sections. Have not yet done that for the zoning district section, which was the last meeting that you heard on the subdivision, on the development code update. That was your last committee meeting. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. So recently, the upcoming meetings, the steering committee did have their most recent meeting on November 4th. So they reviewed the zoning district standards. Planning Commission did as well. Then the upcoming meeting for December 17th for the Planning Commission will be on the general and specific standards. So these will be general development standards as well as specific development standards. So specific development standards will talk about things like, should we have specific standards for, say, drive-through restaurants, banking institutions, mobile home parks, things of that nature. So I wanted to point that out. Those will be coming. That is separate and distinct from objective design standards. The objective design standards that will be coming before the board before the commission are set for a steering committee in March. That'll be March 24th, and then they're scheduled for the Planning Commission April 22nd. So you've got some time before those come in front of you. The objective design standards that we scoped in the scope of work and the RFP were specific to multifamily and non-single family residential. So we did, as Sandra mentioned, we had talked about how minimal of standards should we incorporate, of talking about things that are climate responsive, looking at things like shading, how much glazing and fenestration should be on the south-facing walls and the west-facing walls, how deep should the eaves be, what kind of roof pitch that type of thing. And perhaps it becomes a menu of sorts. Again, we don't want to be restrictive because a lot of these properties are for folks who have pretty tight budgets, so we want to be respectful of that as well. Let's see, where else? I was going to mention also that someone, I think it was Commissioner McPhail, was asking the question about objective design standards for single-family dwellings. That was you. I think it's really been quite rare up until this point. It has not been a big there hasn't been a lot of political support for them for various reasons. They have always applied to multifamily and commercial types of construction, and where HCD has really pulled back on that and required most of these California municipalities to repeal their objective design standards was in respect to multifamily development. So that's where the objective design standards really got a push, and a lot of the work that is being done out there. And part of the reason that we left our RFP out for so long was because a lot of consultants were wrapped up in actually writing objective design standards for a lot of cities because there was money available from the state in order to do that. So there's a big push right now to do that. And again, that's for mostly for multifamily and non-residential. Any questions for staff?
Yes, a couple. Just, I guess we'll start with what we were just talking about there. So did you say that the contract or the RFP that we have in place will not address objective design standards for single-family developments? Is that right?
What we specified was for multifamily and non-residential. In our conversations with them, they expressed a willingness, and they had done some objective design standards for single-family development for, I think it was Visalia, but they were probably not of the scope and scale that would be appropriate for Cathedral City. So we were thinking in our conversations that we were really looking for something that's very localized and very appropriate and very budget-oriented and mostly climate responsive, so that it would be supported by as many people in the community as possible, and also something that council can support.
So the steering group meeting on the 4th discussed zoning districts and definitions, and our December 17th meeting is going to be hearing about that particular?
If that was your last meeting, this will be about the specific and general standards.
I was wondering, is it possible, if a lot of work that I understand, when I know you don't do minutes for the steering group meeting, but is it possible between a steering group meeting and the consultants coming back on the 17th, for example, that cycle that we have, is it possible to maybe give the commission by an email or something just a 5-bullet point, 2-paragraph summary of these are the things that we talked about at the steering group meeting? If it's possible to summarize it quickly. We don't need a 15-page report, but just these were the things we talked about.
I think what you're saying is the 5-page spreadsheet was maybe too much. And
No,
that was really
I don't mind that. I didn't want to put any work on you guys. I'll take 5 pages.
All right, I'll continue to give you that, but yeah, I think after following up on the steering committee, you will get that. So it turns around pretty quick between the steering committee and the planning commission when you hear those issues,
Right.
but I'll provide you with a heads up of what they discussed.
There was one item on the comment tracking that it just reminded me when we had the discussion with the consultants here. I wasn't 100% clear where we left off on it, and it was to do with the duration of permit approvals. And, you know, I think it says on the line somewhere, which I can't read because it's too small, current practice is to allow 3 one-year extensions. I think that's what it said on the line. And I thought that what we had been doing here was the norm was that you gave them a 2-year deal, and then they had to come back for the final year. So I was a bit confused between the 3 one-year extensions and the 2+1 that I thought we were doing. And then following on from that, some of the discussion we had about that issue when the consultants were here seemed to suggest that that 3rd year isn't really discretionary anyway. So it's almost like, was I correct in that sense that they get 3 years? So the idea of 2 years plus coming back a year later is kind of, I don't know, not worth it because they already have 3 years and we don't have anything discretionary to do at that point.
Yeah, and I don't find it in the table here either, but I think that the conclusion was that, and I could be wrong here, and I think that they had 2 years was the given, and then the 1 year was an extension, but the debate was whether it needs to come in front of the planning commission or whether that can be done at the director's, if they can own up some kind of a cause for that, and the director can make that. That's how I remember that, but I'm open to correction if that is not.
There you go. At the steering committee meeting where the consultants proposed to us, should it continue to be a 2+1 or should it just be a 3 moving forward? And if I recall from my memory, and maybe you remember differently, but I remember everyone still supporting the 2+1 because there was a idea that you want to give people more of a sense of urgency, that we want this to be done in 2 years. And if you tell them 3, then they can be a little more lackadaisical about it. So the idea that they had to do additional paperwork to come back to ask for that extension, it's enough of a deterrent that maybe they would get it done in 2 years. That's at least what I remember.
And I think the other issue is that it's not just it is a discretionary action, but it's kind of a limited discretionary action in that you can't just willy-nilly deny a time extension. If they're working on it and the environmental circumstance hasn't changed, then you really have no reason to deny it. But that's the key, is if the environmental circumstance were to change, then you would have reason to deny it because they would have to go back and take care of that. So let's say they, the June beetle was discovered on the property, or the silver eagle was made a habitat there, then they would have to address that. And then you could have reason to either continue or deny the time extension. So that's another reason why you don't want to just give them the 3 years.
Also, though, if there's zero evidence that anything has occurred in 2 years, do we have the ability to say, why should we give you a third year? Not environmental, just they've done nothing. And they can say, oh,
You need to have findings to be able to deny that extension.
you
zero
repeat that?
activity could be one of those
Could you
findings.
repeat that?
You need to have a finding that you can back that to be able to deny that
It's
third year.
it's a difficult thing to do if they just aren't moving forward. And maybe our city attorney could get back to us on that, in that most cities, there's not a whole lot of discretion on the 3 years, whether it's 3 1 years, 2 years, and a year. It's the average attorney will say, unless the environmental circumstances changed, you really don't have a whole lot of discretion. However, there is one exception to that, but this city always does things that, not this city, the city I'm going to mention, always seems to have a way around doing things like that. And I don't know if it's whether they have development agreements that go with it, and they're not up to the performance standards, but Palm Springs always seems to measure the progress of the project as part of their evaluation of the time extension. And I've never known how they do that, because I don't think that's part of, it's not part of the evaluation. So maybe you can let us know if they're just not doing anything, if the city does have the right to deny it.
My understanding of this is that it typically depends on what the underlying permit is, whether that was a quasi-judicial permit or some type of legislative action by the local jurisdiction, and then that really sort of dictates the level of review. So you have your substantial evidence versus abuse of discretion levels of review, and so obviously, you want to have findings, and some cities will actually adopt a list of findings that would need to be made in order to grant an extension. But, it kind of just depends on each city. So I'm not sure if that's what maybe the other city has done in this case, but, you know, good rule of thumb is, you know, have evidence in the record that at the very least shows that there was reason and thought and evidence to support the decision that was made, whether to deny or not. Some cities may have a standard of that pegs to the progress of the project as well.
Well, maybe then, Cynthia, you can, I don't know if this is the proper forum to add that to our list, but it sounds like there's interest. You know, to find out if we write into the findings for the time extension that there's significant, you know, there's movement for the project that's reasonable movement, that, you know, that would be a reason to grant the time extension. The precedent that you might be able to use goes back to Jeremy. His name comes up again. Is that in the building code, you have 90 days before your permit expires. And if you don't show any activity, then the building director for that city can terminate your permit, and you're in trouble because then you've lost everything. So, you know, you have to do something within that 90 days, whether it's a little something or a big something, it's up to the building director. But maybe we could build something into our code that guarantees some kind of progress rather than just waiting for 3 years and for the project to expire. So if you could look into that.
Yes, so I think what I recall the conversation being was that, yes, 2 years was adequate, and I think the argument to going to the 2 years and sticking with the 2 years was that as long as it was consistent across the application types, it gives the developer, you know, adequate time in order to mobilize his financing and to get do the rest of his pre-building permit work so that he can actually apply for that building permit, because once they apply and get that building permit, that clock starts ticking and it goes right away. So the findings would have to be made in order to grant the extension past the 2-year application approval deadline, right? So then the plan, if legal would support that, and if planning feels that city can support that, then we could potentially look at some findings. Right now, there are no findings. Again, harkening back my experience, we have struggled with the same question of, do we need to make those findings, or can we just make them based on the developer is having a hard time, the market has changed, market mechanics have changed, or the financing has softened to the point that they can't pull it together, and then we would take that application recommendation forward. So it's been difficult to codify what kind of findings, because it's difficult for a developer to actually substantiate, you know, the market has softened to such an extent that we expect it to ease up in a couple of years.
Talk to the technical advisory committee, which is not us, that's the staff committee, which would, I assume, include the city attorney, and look into having some kind of findings that can be made, and then bring that back to the steering committee, and then that'll eventually make it back to this group.
It won't go back to the steering committee because that was it was already a past section, but what will happen is if we decide to change where we landed with the outcome after the steering committee and the planning commission's advice on that previously, if we decide to change that and incorporate findings in this, we can decide that on our own, and then that will be incorporated into the code, and that will become a noted change when that entire code comes back to this.
It's still going to come back to this group, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, okay, so the steering committee is out of the equation.
Correct.
Talk to the technical advisory committee and see what the parameters are. And then when it comes here, we can discuss it and find out if there's any merit to having those findings. I mean, I think just, you know, they don't have to be the strongest things in the world, but sometimes it's a matter of they're just looking for funding, and they can tell us, you know, we were looking for funding and this is where we looked, and, you know, we're still looking. But why don't you look into that and give us your professional opinion.
Will do. Thank you.
Moving on to commissioners' comments, and before I go to the commissioners, I do want to mention that I think we're all very saddened by the loss of Council Member Carnevale. I've known him for a number of years. We've worked on things together. I was talking to him at CV Link opening just a week or so ago, and so it's both for the city and personally, it's a very sad loss.
I too am, when I got the email, I'm very saddened. I've known him, may he rest in peace, for over 20 years as a staff member, as a private citizen, and I think he's the reason that I'm up here on the dais. He was very helpful to not just somebody that was in his district, but anybody that would reach out and ask for his help. I reached out for his help. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I was very upset with the police department, but it turned out I was wrong. And he got the information to me, and they explained to me what I did was actually wrong, and that I had no reason to be mad. But the point is that he took an interest in it and solved the problem. And I also talked to him at length about street vendors and different things like that. And he always listened. And I don't think that was just me because I was a planning commissioner or a staff person. I think he did that for everybody. Because when you went into his restaurant, he would talk to anybody and find out, what do you think? What's going on? What do you like? What do you don't like? It's just a great person. It's a great loss to the city.
Okay. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I did not know Councilmember Carnevale as well as you two probably did, being more recent to the city, and but every interaction that I had with him, whether it was city related or out and about, because I ran into him a few times, he was always very enthusiastic. He was very excited. He was super, I don't know, you could really tell that he wanted to make the city the best it could be, and I think that always came through in all my interactions with him. I know the last time I really talked to him in depth was at the State of the City event, and he was very excited about the development code update. He actually grabbed me and said, I have a bunch of questions about the consultants and what they're proposing, and he really got into a lot of detail, and I thought that was great, and was just happy to see how excited he was that we were working on it. I just feel like it's a loss, definitely a loss for the city, and to have someone who's just really that committed in for so long.
Commissioner McPhail.
Nothing to add beyond associating myself with the remarks already made.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to city attorney comments. No. Okay, so staff comments.
I'll lead off and I'll let Sandra fill in any gaps I create. So you all experienced the temporary microphones. We are in a period where we are starting to upgrade equipment in the study session room and in this room. Work has actually commenced in the study session room. We are upgrading that first so that we can convene meetings in the study session room while work is underway in this room. So for your next meeting, I'd encourage you to look closely at the agenda and make sure you're looking at the meeting location. It is highly probable that your meeting location will be in the study session room. The current timeline has this room going dark about the time of your next meeting. So we'll look to make sure that the improvements have been made in the study session room, that we are fully operational, that we have audio-visual equipment that can support a meeting, and your next meeting will likely be there. So you have a look-ahead agenda, and we've got a couple items programmed for December, And that's what I have to share with you tonight.
As you know, our meetings are always constantly crowded with the public. But is there going to be space down there at council meetings and so on for the public, or are they going to have overflow, or how are they going to do that?
So we're working on the logistics for that, and we'll have more information to share.
Good. Right. Thank you.
I wanted to give kudos to staff. I already mentioned this to Sandra, but I wanted to put it on the record. I think one of the struggles you always have when you're when you're dealing with a building is screening the equipment, whether it's on the roof or the ground. And take a look at the Starbucks and the, I forgot the name of the other restaurant. Chipotle, thank you. They came up with a very unique way of screening the roof equipment by not just using landscaping or a screen wall, but incorporating the architecture into it. And I just thought that was a really great idea. And when you have time and you pass by there, take a look at it, because it really looks good, and it really screens the equipment.
Were there any further staff comments?
The only comment I would say, Chair, is that the standard attachments of the attendance record and the look ahead for future meeting items is attached to the report. Again, those are tentative projects for December 3rd. We are having a December 3rd meeting, and so when the agenda goes out, we'll have a final list.
Okay.
So we have a meeting December 3rd and
We
the
do.
17th.
We do.
On that 3rd of December meeting, we have like 2 CUPs, a presentation, and a discussion. That seems like we've got a lot on our plate for the 3rd. I was a wee bit worried about the length of that one. I was also wondering, is there a difference between presentation and discussion? Because discussion is listed for the specific plan area thing, and I was wondering, does that mean, I'm hoping that we'll get a presentation of some quantitative information about what are specific plan areas, where are they, when were they started, what were their intents. I'm hoping that'd be that sort of information.
We will make sure we have that information when we provide that. And I guess sometimes it's used interchangeably, but there will be a presentation, but it will be a discussion. We have about 30 specific plans, and so we're going to take them in chunks as far as discussing them. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This meeting now adjourned.